All right, everybody. As promised, I have on the line with me by telephone, we have Dolly Kyle, author of Hillary, the Other Woman. Dolly, how are you?
I'm doing great, Matt. How are you?
Very well, and I'm glad that we met. I mentioned on the show last night when I was talking about how you were going to be on tonight's show that there is kind of a part one of this for people to see because we met last night on Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades, and that should be up on YouTube and available sometime today before we run this tonight. So people will be able to.
That's great. And I thought that was wonderful fun. I hope Gary isn't sitting there pouting and sucking his thumb, but I think he can take it, right?
He's a big boy. He's a little sensitive. He's a sensitive man, but no, you got some good zingers on him. He appreciates that.
Well, my southern sense of humor. When we like someone, that's when we insult them the most. So
there you go.
Hopefully he figured that out. Okay.
There you go. That reminds me, speaking of that, I noticed on your website, I was looking at, it's a very nice website, dollykyle.com, and I like the tagline you have there, politely revealing Southern secrets. I dig that.
Well, I was trying to think of something. I was actually trying to copy John Grisham, who says he's America's favorite storyteller, and I'm not going to take that away from him.
Sure.
I was trying to think, what exactly am I doing? And the website now only has my novels on it. I wanted to keep those very separated from this new book, Hillary, the Other Woman, because it is nonfiction. It is absolutely true. I name names, dates, places, everything is accurate. So the novels are loosely based on my life story, which, by coincidence, includes Billy and Hillary, but from a fictional standpoint.
Yeah, and I didn't know that when we were talking last night on the show. I was kind of, as I was doing my research after the fact, kind of learning more about you. I didn't realize you had written. Is it 3 novels in the series?
It's the Heart trilogy. I wrote Purposes of the Heart, which I started in 1986 as a therapeutic journal, and that's what led me into my understanding of sex addiction and codependency and all those things that I dealt with through 12-step programs over the years. Mm-hmm. And as I was writing that, I realized, wow, this would make a cool story. And so I turned it into a novel, and Billy Clinton, by the way, knew about this all along as I was writing it and was very encouraging. And then when I went to publish that, Billy totally changed his tune.
Right.
And Hillary and her little sniveling sycophant, Sidney Blumenthal, I'm so proud I can say that quickly. Sniveling sycophant Sidney Blumenthal planted a false story about me in the New Yorker magazine, denigrating me and my reputation among publishers in New York so that my book would not get published. And they probably did not expect that I would file a federal lawsuit over that, which I did. Anyway, that was the first book. All is well, right?
And
silly me, glutton for punishment. I wrote the second novel of the trilogy.
Yeah.
Covering the same time period, but through the eyes of different characters and showing other things that were going on in the background, which I think would make the best movie because, there's international travel and dead bodies and things like that.
Sure.
And then the third one is called Perjuries of the Heart and goes through, let's say, a fictionalized impeachment of a fictionalized president.
Yes.
But I really did want to keep those separate because I don't want people saying, you're lying and whatever, because I'm not. And I think the foreword to my book, written by Dave Stippers, is probably one of the best testimonies anyone can get. And for those who don't know, Dave Stippers was the chief investigative counsel of the Clinton impeachment. And after the extensive FBI investigations of all the parties involved, they chose me to be the primary prosecution witness at the Clinton impeachment trial. Of course, as we know, that never happened.
But you mentioned, I noticed something. You mentioned that Bill Clinton was encouraging when you were originally writing the first novel. Right. Did he not realize that it was based on him? Is that why he was encouraging about it?
Oh, no. He did realize it, and this is what's so odd. And I did put a quote from him about that on the back cover of the dust jacket of this book, Hillary the Other Woman, and there is a chapter in there that talks about my songwriting and Billy's reaction to that, because a lot of the songs that I wrote were about our relationship. And I said, you have to be careful about this. People are going to figure this out. He said he wasn't worried about it. That's what he always said. He wasn't worried about it.
Interesting.
And I said, what about what the state troopers know about us and all that? And he said, don't worry about it. I didn't realize at the time that he and Hillary had this conspiracy to destroy anyone who got in their way. So it's like, yeah, don't worry about it. I'll put you on the railroad track later.
Wow.
Or under the bus or whatever.
Wow, that's interesting. That's and creepy. Wow.
Yeah, a lot of things are creepier in retrospect than they were at the time. I think sometimes it was Alice through the looking glass. I mean, you know, it's funny because I have a background in psychology, at 39 hours as a psychology major, and then I went to law school. So you would think I wouldn't be completely naive, but in regard to Billy Clinton, I was. And, of course, I had no idea that he had raped Juanita Broaddrick, had no idea that he was a serial sexual predator when I was in a relationship with him. And Hillary knew, of course, and she was, starting with Juanita Broaddrick, threatening the women who were with Billy in consensual or non-consensual ways. And so, you know, that's been what they've been doing all along. And going back before that, you know, Marla Kreider at the University of Arkansas in 1974, a lovely young woman Billy was dating there, and Hillary found out about her, swooped in, went through Billy's papers, shredded his notes and cards and things from Marla, and started making threatening phone calls to Marla to get rid of her. So, you know, when she wiped her server with a cloth was not the first time she had destroyed documents. That way.
Well, like I pointed out last night on Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades, it's kind of like because you spoke on that show about how Hillary was very thorough in terms of destroying documents, shredding documents, and whatnot, you know, kind of back in the day. And it struck me that my observation was it's kind of like her getting into trouble with these emails and this other server and everything. It kind of seems like she's trying to continue doing what she's always done, except now she has to grapple with the technology and not.
That's right. Yeah. And she has a bit of a problem with that. And as Dave Shipper said in the foreword to the book, this book, Hillary the Other Woman, is as timely as tomorrow's newspaper, because I go from the premise that what's past is prologue, and those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And I point out the patterns of the Clintons and the psychological and emotional dynamics underlying those, so it becomes very clear who they are, what they will do, which is anything, and what they will do in the future. So if you read this and you study this, there will be no surprises. And there's nothing that happens on a daily basis where I can't get a call from a media person, right-wing media person, because the others are ignoring me, and ask about whatever particular thing happened today, and I can tie it right back into the books, like, oh, yeah, I predicted that here, this is what happened there, blah, 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 same thing.
Sure. What is your read on their marriage? Because you saw it as up close as anyone, because there's always been these theories, and these aren't new. People have speculated for years that Bill and Hillary, it's a marriage of convenience. And some of what you describe about Hillary, it sounds to me like she's more, not so much like a wife to him, but more like a fixer. You know, like she's the one who comes in and fixes everything and cleans up the messes that he leaves in terms of shredding documents and whatnot. I mean, do you think they love each other? Is it a marriage of convenience? There's all these theories about Hillary being a lesbian and all that. What's your read on that?
I think, Matt, at this point, I think they hate each other, but they're in this, three-way pact with the devil, and I'm using that allegorically. People don't get all excited, but I'm just saying, what they've had from the beginning is a political partnership. It was supposed to work a little differently. Hillary was supposed to be president in 2008, and of course Barack Obama came in with Saul Alinsky methods of corruption and actually beat Hillary at her own Alinsky game, which really made her angry. But they got together because Hillary saw Billy as a coattail ride to the White House. And then people say, well, how could she have known he was going to the White House? Well, she met him in law school at Yale in 1971. I and a lot of other kids at Hot Springs High School knew in 1963, 64 that Billy was going to be president. I knew that I knew that I knew it. I told my friends. I told my cousins here on the East Coast. And, in fact, people wrote in Billy's high school annual things like, see you in the White House someday.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's wild.
There was just this certain it quality that he had that everyone knew it. And so Hillary, 7 years later, could have certainly picked up on that.
Yeah.
And then, she went to Washington after law school. She tried to make it on her own. She got that job after law school on the Watergate Commission, but she was so dishonest and had no integrity, she couldn't even get a letter of recommendation from her boss for another job. And some people say she was fired. She may have been. I don't know that for a fact, so I don't say that. But I do know she couldn't get a letter of recommendation, which for a lawyer is tantamount to a really bad black eye. And she flunked the Washington, D.C. bar exam.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, so she's turned that into this romantic story of how she gave up everything in Washington and moved to Arkansas to be with Billy Clinton. I mean, please.
Yeah.
Puke alert here.
Yeah.
But anyway, they married in October of 1975, and she's been riding his coattails ever since. But the other thing she does, well, there's a couple of things. One, she was to be the financial stability for the two of them while he got established as a politician. And he's very good. I mean, he's probably one of the top 5 politicians, certainly ever in this country.
Sure.
Hillary, not so much. But she was to provide the financial stability, which is why when she had the opportunity to steal money, shall we say, through the cattle futures trading and trying to make money hand over fist in Whitewater and all of those things, that was her role, as had been Billy's mother's role when he was growing up. She was a nurse anesthetist, and I can't say that 4 times fast. But she was a very hard worker, not to mention a runaround. But anyway, she was a hard worker, and so that was in Billy's psychic and emotional background. But the thing before that really explains his attraction, if you will, to Hillary was the fact that he was raised for the first 4 or 5 years of his life by his maternal grandmother. And I talk about this in the book, of course. But she was a mean, controlling, angry woman. Fast forward to 1971 at Yale, and there is this subliminal, compelling attraction of Billy to a controlling, angry, seething woman. And these are the kinds of things that without treatment people fall into, and this is why men and women marry and divorce, marry and divorce, marry and divorce.
Sure.
And you think, wow, well, he seems so different. But if you get down to the underlying psychological dynamic, you find they keep marrying the same person. One may be short and blonde and the other's tall and dark-haired, but the underlying psychological dynamic is the same. And that is the case with the Clintons. It's also interesting, in 2008, I think it was, when Hillary was running for president, she said very sincerely that she considered marriage to be a sacred bond between a man and a woman. And she was being duplicitous at the time because Billy was never faithful to her before they were engaged, while they were engaged, while they were married, ever.
Right.
And what she has done, I do not know of my own personal knowledge, but I know the same rumors you know.
Sure.
And I also know that Billy told me that they needed to have a baby to make them appear to be a normal couple, and to take attention away from Hillary's lifestyle,
Yes.
as he called it. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And, I've always thought, too, I mean, she's got to be, for her to endure what she's endured in terms of the public humiliation of, take, for example, the Monica Lewinsky scandal as just one example of the many public humiliations she's had to kind of endure. And, it's like, I mean, I look at that as someone who doesn't know these people as an outsider. I look at that and think, well, she's either loyal to a fault, beyond to a fault, or she just, she doesn't want to lose her ride to the White House, to being, not First Lady, but to being president. I mean, how else do you explain? I mean, who else would tolerate what she's had to tolerate, in her marriage?
Unfortunately, Matt, a lot of women tolerate that because they are financially bound to their husband. They have no education, they have no career, no job, and they don't think they can get out. That's why there are so many shelters for abused women, and to try to help them to get away from relationships like that. There's more than one way of abusing a woman. It doesn't have to be beating her up or even speaking down to her and denigrating her all the time. Hillary has been beaten up and abused by Billy with all these relationships with other women that he's had. And she knew about me, and she even knew that he had raped Juanita because she then threatened Juanita to keep her mouth shut. So this is nothing new, and any decent woman of integrity, particularly one with a law degree who had been First Lady, could have left him and gotten another job.
Right.
But no, she wasn't going to do that because, for example, back in 1990, Billy was governor. He'd been governor for 8 years and really didn't want to serve another term. At that point also, Arkansas had changed the law so that the governor's term was not 2 years, it has been always in the past, but it went to 4 years.
Okay.
Which meant if he became governor in 1990, then he couldn't run for president in 1992 without dropping out of the governor's office, and that was his promise to the people of Arkansas.
Yeah.
So they did a poll at the time, and to see if Hillary could run for governor and sort of mark the time for them in that office. And the poll showed Hillary couldn't be elected to anything in Arkansas. So after all those years there, people still disliked her as much as they did when she got there. And bless her heart, her only friend, I think, was Diane Blair, who later died. And we have some glimpse into that from some notes and journals and all that Diane left. I haven't really studied that, but I just heard about it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people can look that up online if they find any interest in it. But anyway, Hillary has been always clutching Billy's coattails, and she wasn't angry that he had this affair with Monica.
Mm-hmm.
She was angry that he got caught.
Right.
Okay, and there's another dozen or so interns he was messing with over time in the White House, and she didn't have to get angry about those because he didn't get caught.
Right.
But see, every time he gets caught, she has to go through this humiliation scene, and she has to do what she can do to destroy the woman. And, she called Monica some kind of a Looney Tunes and whatever. She got a little bit quiet after that semen-stained dress showed up and DNA proved it was Billy.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing, too, is she goes into hiding when she has done something really stupid, like her initial work on a health care plan that was a disaster that resulted in lawsuits by doctors, that resulted in Freedom of Information Act suits against her because she hides everything. She's so paranoid. She makes Richard Nixon look like an open book.
Yeah.
But then she goes, once she's been humiliated or done something really stupid, she goes and hides, which is what she's still doing, and it's very interesting. She hasn't had a press conference since December of 2015. Mm-hmm. and there's a couple things involved in that. One of which I think is the most serious, damning piece of information in regard to her absolute inability to be president.
Yeah, this is important. I'm glad you brought this up. Yeah.
Yeah. As I talk about in chapter 50 of this book, that's the final chapter, and they are short chapters, by the way. These are sort of tip of the iceberg explanations and introductions to these various scandals, but gives the reader who has not followed the Clintons in excruciating detail a very good idea of what's been going on. But anyway, I thought, well, should I or should I not include this information in Chapter 50? And then I decided, well, I absolutely must. And I went to the website for the Centers for Disease Control, which anyone else can do, and I looked up cognitive impairment. Now, that phrase just popped in my head, which is not surprising since I was a psychology major.
Yeah.
And a lot of terms have changed since I took psychology so many years ago. So I looked it up, and sure enough, there's cognitive impairment. One of the big things is a failure of the memory. Now, it's interesting, and I know a lot of us have dealt with parents and grandparents who are mentally losing it as they get older. It could be dementia, it could be Alzheimer's, it could be an injury, whatever. But we all know what happens to some people when they start losing their minds a little bit at a time. And they have good long-term memory, but their short-term memory gets worse and worse.
Right.
But that's one of the things that's most noticeable with Hillary, so that when she was questioned about Benghazi, for example, and when she's questioned about a lot of other things under oath, 250 times she said, "I do not remember." Now, we have two choices. We can either believe that she did not remember, in which case that's a very good indication of cognitive impairment, or we can believe that she's lying.
Yeah.
And I guess there could be a combination. But none of that's good. I mean, none of that is good. The other thing that a person with cognitive impairment cannot do is make a plan for much of anything. And so that's why, an elderly person who's losing it mentally cannot go to the grocery store with a list and know what they need to buy for the coming week, because that's just a part of their brain that is deteriorating.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you look at the emails to Hillary a month before the Benghazi attack, when Ambassador Stevens was begging for reinforcements, begging for a plan, begging for help from Hillary, the Secretary of State, the person in charge of his life and security, and he got nothing. And people wonder, how could that happen? Well, a woman who is cognitively impaired cannot make that kind of a plan. And Hillary doesn't have to go shopping for her own groceries. It's probably a good thing. But it's no, I mean, really, she can't make a plan. And the other thing is that they cannot handle an emergency.
Yeah.
So if your grandmother is in cooking and a fire starts in the kitchen, she's going to get confused, and she may run out of the house, or she may not.
Right.
She may go in the other room and lock the door to the bedroom. She may do something that makes no sense, nothing that a normally functioned person would do in an emergency. And so, on the night of the Benghazi attack, when Hillary finds out there is a real, honest-to-God, life-threatening emergency of Americans in Benghazi, she turns over and goes back to sleep, just like the grandmother who locks herself in the bedroom while the fire's burning in the kitchen.
Yeah, wow, that is scary. Yeah, my and I mentioned this too on Gary's show. My dad, who's pretty well credentialed, Dr. Martin Connarton, he has told me that obviously, and just to be clear, he has not sat down with her, so he's not giving her a diagnosis. Of course, they've never met, but he has told me that that when he sees her on television, he has felt for a long time that there's something a little bit wrong. It was something a little bit off about her. And by the way, too, let me ask you this, because now that I'm thinking about my dad, something my dad's been telling me for years. He met Bill Clinton at a campaign event here in New Hampshire back in, it was probably 91, going into the 92 election. But he met him, before the primary. And he claims, my father claims that he's certain, because he got to shake hands with him and look him in the eyes, that Bill Clinton was high at that event. And this is something we didn't get into at all on Gary's show, but I'm curious. I mean, did Bill Clinton ever use any kind of drugs at all that you're aware of? Because it's not an accusation I've ever heard made about him specifically.
No. Those accusations have been made for decades.
Have they? Yeah.
You may not have heard it all the way up here.
Yeah.
But now, let me say there are two things about that. One, I, of my own personal knowledge, have not ever had a conversation with Billy about his use of drugs, nor have I ever seen him use drugs.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's that. Because I like to be very clear about what I know and about what is hearsay and what I think, totally baloney. But I think there is certainly enough evidence of this, enough anecdotal evidence from people I have talked to, from people I do believe, from people who have seen him use cocaine. I do believe that that's the fact. But due to the relationship that Billy and I had, having been friends since I was 11, he was 12, we met on the golf course in Hot Springs, Billy knew a couple of things about me. One, I never did drink, and I never did drugs, and I didn't approve of that, okay?
Yeah.
So despite the fact that we were having an illicit, adulterous affair, which, by the way, was wrong, and for which I have repented, we don't need to go all that way.
Yeah.
But because he knew that about me, he wouldn't show me that part of him. And you see, this is one of the things that really good pathological liars and addicts can do. And you probably know this just in general. An addict can be one of the most charming and manipulative people on the planet. They're often very intelligent, and they do what they need to do to get what they need for their fix. So Billy's relationship with me did not include any discussion of drugs, but I absolutely would bet nearly anything on the fact that he did use cocaine, and there is anecdotal evidence that he was taken to the emergency room at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, and that Hillary threatened the doctors there that if they said anything about it, they would never practice medicine in Arkansas.
Wow.
That's anecdotal. I did not hear it.
Yeah.
Directly.
Yeah.
But it came from reputable sources, and I listed a couple of names in the index in Chapter 46. Chapter 46 is the big problem. And the big problem is that the problem is so big and that there's so many Clinton scandals that the average person just can't wrap their mind around it. I mean, how could two people do so many things wrong, illegal, and get away with it for all these years?
Yeah.
And in that chapter, I list in alphabetical order about 150 of the Clinton scandals or connections that people should look up if they have any interest in it. You can find the information if you want it. But, I could have written an encyclopedia, and I didn't choose to do that. I'm so sick of them. I'd love to be rid of it. But at any rate, it's in Chapter 46. The next thing is Chapter 47 is called Media Magic, or How to Make a Story Disappear. And I explain exactly how the media handles these issues from way back. And I will bet you there's not one person in your listening audience who knows that I filed a racketeering-influenced corrupt organizations, RICO, federal lawsuit against Billy Clinton when he was a sitting president. I will bet you. I mean, try to get someone to call in and say, oh, yeah, I knew that.
Right,
I
yeah.
don't think so.
I didn't know about that until you mentioned it on Gary's show yesterday. I had no idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I said there, and I think it's actually worth repeating, when I filed this lawsuit against Billy, he and his lawyers filed a motion saying he shouldn't have to answer this now because he was president and he was too busy, blah, blah, blah. And the district court said, no, she's right. She has a right to sue you now, and you have to answer. So he took that to the appeals court, the federal appeals court. And the federal appeals court said, sorry, President Clinton, but the district court is right. You have to answer this and deal with it now. And he took that all the way to the United States Supreme Court, who said, sorry, Dolly's right. She can sue you, and she can sue you now, and you need to deal with it. Okay, Lisa Myers, the famous and full of integrity reporter from NBC, the same woman who interviewed Juanita Broderick about the rape by Billy Clinton. The same Lisa Myers called me and wanted to do an interview with me on the courthouse steps, a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., when I was up there. And, seemed reasonable.
Yeah.
She called me the night before, and she said, Dolly, we have to cancel the interview in the morning. And I said, why is that? Is it going to rain? I mean, silly me.
Yeah.
It's just, I got this Arkansas thing. Well, everything is dependent upon the weather and whether the Razorbacks are playing that weekend.
Oh, okay.
So, anyway, she said, no, the NBC higher-ups nixed it.
Wow.
And so, the fact that an issue went to the United States Supreme Court and the president lost was not news to NBC.
That's incredible. And this would have been, was this 98? This was toward the end of his term?
You know what? It was 98 or 99. I don't really remember.
Yeah.
That was just one of those things. I tried to block it out because I'm a real estate lawyer. I do not like litigation. I didn't want to do that. It was something I felt I had to do as my civic duty.
Yeah.
Just like writing this book. I mean, if anyone thinks I wanted to write this book, think again, people. I'm very happy writing novels and living my life.
Yeah.
But you know what happened? I saw Hillary on that infamous ad where she looked very sincere and looked into the camera and said that women who claim to have been raped and sexually assaulted should be believed. We need to support these women.
I remember that.
And, and I thought, you lying, hypocritical dog. And it made me so angry. I wanted to throw a shoe at the television, but that wouldn't have helped, and it was a new TV. So I instead, the next day, I started writing this book. And that was January. I started writing this book in January of this year. So anyone who knows anything about publishing knows that it's something of a minor miracle that, first off, I didn't go looking for an agent. I didn't go looking for a publisher. Joseph Farah of WND Books heard about it and called me, and we did a publishing agreement, and I finished the book mid-March, and it was released the end of June. I mean,
wow.
That may be
That's
all
fast.
land records for putting out a hardcover book with a fabulous cover, if I do say so myself.
Yes,
I think
that is.
Mark Terrace did such a wonderful job with that thing. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, that is very quick. See, I didn't realize that you had started writing in January?
Yeah, I started this book in January.
That is fast. Let me ask you this.
I did 92,000 words in 65 days of writing. I took off on Sundays, as I do.
Yeah.
And, that was a lot.
That's stunning. Wow. Now, let me ask you this. So, do you, Dolly, have you heard from anybody doing that sort of soft intimidation is what I heard Juanita Broderick describe it as? Because I've heard her. By the way, Juanita Broderick, I'll mention her because you mentioned her. She was recently on another show that we carry here on IPM Nation, the Opperman Report. And the interesting thing about Juanita Broderick is her story through the years has been very consistent, which I think kind of lends to the credibility of it, that, her story has never changed. She's never wavered in it. But she's talked about the intimidation. I mean, what have you experienced, or have you experienced anything, or are they just trying to kind of ignore you, or do you hear from them?
Well, it is a combination, and because we have such a very long history, dating back to 1959 and through the decades of my relationship with Billy, and we were what I considered to be friends. And in 1992, and I am answering your question, okay? In 1992, right after the Jennifer Flowers story broke in Star Magazine, Peter Williams, the reporter who had written that story, left a message on my answering machine telling me that he had my story and wanted to talk to me about it. Mm-hmm. Well, I had no intention of talking to him, so I called Billy, and he was traveling at the time. We had both just left San Antonio. He was going back to New Hampshire. I was going back to Dallas, and his secretary said, oh, my goodness, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm not going to talk to him, but I want to talk to Billy. I just want to warn him, and I want to talk to him. So she told me he was going back to New Hampshire. And so I waited for Billy to call me, and he didn't, so I called back, and then I called his campaign headquarters. No, I got a call from his campaign headquarters in New Hampshire, or his apartment where he was staying. I'm not sure which it was. Mm-hmm. And his call was from my own brother, who had been campaigning with and for Billy since 1974. My brother is a lawyer, a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, a pilot, a very competent person, to say the least. Yeah. And he was with Billy in New Hampshire, and he called me, and he says, what's going on? And I told him, and I said, I want to talk to Billy. And he says, well, we don't think you should talk to him. We are afraid the phone conversation might be recorded. I said, I don't do that sort of thing. Just let me talk to Billy. I was upset. Picture this. I had known this guy for 30-something years. Yeah. And he doesn't want to talk to me on the phone. Anyway, so we're back and forth, and this goes over a 24-hour period. Long story. I did put some of this in this book, and I immortalized it somewhat better in my novels, but of course that was fictionalized. It was set in Mississippi, where I never lived. But anyway, and I could hear Billy in the background from time to time, not all the time, but sometimes when they were calling. And ultimately, my brother said to me, if you cooperate with the media, we will destroy you.
Wow. And this is from your own brother saying this?
It's from my own brother, with Billy sitting there telling him that. Wow. So then, amazingly, shortly after that, when Hillary heard about what was going on, I don't know who told her, probably Billy. Yeah. She came up with this plan to do a show on 60 Minutes. Now, you think you know where this story is going because Billy and Hillary showed up on 60 Minutes. Yes. What you don't know, if you didn't read my book, is that her original plan was to invite me to be on the show. Really? With Billy and Hillary. And to say, this is Dolly Kyle. She and Billy have been friends since they were children. They dated in high school. They had a long affair that lasted into our marriages. I knew about it. Everyone is sorry. It's over. It will never happen again. Everything's fine. And I said, well, what about Jennifer Flowers? And they said, well, we'll deny Jennifer Flowers, but just take all the attention and focus it on you. Huh. And I, who was teaching Sunday school to second graders at the time, did not think it would be a good idea to see my picture splashed on the new National Enquirer cover when my old second graders were in the grocery store begging for bubble gum. Right. And so I said, well, that's not the only reason. I said, no, I'm not doing that. Yeah. Of course I'm not doing that. So when I didn't cooperate with them for that, I presume that the previous "we will destroy you" threat remained in effect. Mm-hmm. Then 2 years later, when I ran into Billy Clinton, actually he accosted me at our 30th high school reunion. Really? And that's another thing that's I think it's probably in every book, because it was the pivotal piece that should have been the end of the story. Yeah. As a novelist, I thought, this is great, 30th high school reunion, we got this big scene, it dates back to when we met, end of story. Done. Except that after the reunion, at which time I told Billy that the book was finished and I was getting ready to publish it. And he said, so now I guess you'll have it published. He said, just put the hook in and rip my guts out.
That's what he said to you at the reunion?
That's what he said. Yeah, he said. So you'll just put the hook in and rip my guts out. Yeah. And I said, no. That's been done to me, and I know what it feels like. So I wouldn't do it to another person. Because that's what he did to me when he said, we will destroy you.
Right, right.
And so then after that, he had Bruce Lindsay, his right-hand guy, call my sister, and Bruce had known, I don't know, back in high school, for years. The same thing, little small town Arkansas, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
And so with Bruce and my sister as go-betweens, we came up with a deal for what would happen while I was publishing my book. And the deal was, when I was talking to a publisher or the media or anything, I would not tell the true story about Billy. I would just say, this is a fictionalized story of my life. I would not tell the truth about him. And in return, he would not tell any lies about me.
How's that for a bargain, huh?
That was the deal, right? That was our deal. And then I said, well, how can I know that this deal is in place? And, I wrote this in the book. I'm not sure if it's in the Hillary book or not. But anyway, I need to reread that thing because, there's been so much that happened over so many years, and I've talked about so much of it lately.
Yeah.
And I think, did I put that in there or not? But at any rate, we had this deal. And I said, well, how am I going to know the deal's in place? And he says, well, if a reporter or anyone wants to know about your relationship with Billy, just have them call the White House. Here's Bruce Lindsay's direct number. They talk to, not direct, but extension.
Yeah.
And they can talk to Bruce. And I said, well, he'll just deny it. Yeah. And they said, no, here's what he will say. He will say, quote, the White House will have no comment, unquote. And I said, well, that's the same as a denial. And he said, no. He will use the words, quote, and unquote. And any reporter will recognize that as a signal.
Right.
So I remember one of the first reporters to do that was Ann Gerhardt with the Washington Post. And she called me. She'd heard about this story. And I said, look. She said, now you're just making this up about this affair with Clinton, right? I said, no. And look, I'm not even going to bother trying to convince you. Just call the White House and ask Bruce Lindsay. Here's the number.
Yeah.
She said, well, they'll just deny it. And I said, no. They will say, quote, the White House will have no comment, unquote. She said, that's a denial. I said, just call the number. She called the number. She called me back. She says, oh, my God. He said, quote, the White House will have no comment, unquote. She said, that's a deal. You obviously have a deal in place.
Wow.
And I said, well, here's the deal. If I had a deal, I'm sure that part of the deal would be to say that I didn't have a deal, so I'm not saying that I have a deal.
Right.
And obviously we had a deal. However, I didn't know, because I was keeping my part of the deal, I didn't know that they were going around behind my back.
Yeah.
Planting lies and stories about me, and they planted this false story in the New Yorker magazine that Jane Mayer wrote. And Jane Mayer, I found out later, was a friend of, let me see if I can do it again, the sniveling sycophant Sidney Blumenthal. And the story was about my book and how Al Regnery of Regnery Press was denigrating this book. It was not even Regnery wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And all this, and when I read that story, I called Al Regnery. I said, well, basically, who are you and what are you saying? And he said, I didn't say any of that. But you see, the paranoid Hillary, knowing that I had a book, figured that I sent it to Regnery because they were known for publishing right-wing literature.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
But I did not want my book to be a political statement. I was
Right.
a novelist. I wanted it to be a novel.
Right.
I wanted it to be taken on its own merit. So I did not send it to Regnery. He never saw it. So they made that up out of whole cloth.
Yeah.
So then Diane, can't remember her last name at the moment. Anyway, a writer with the Washington Post heard about this story because Ann Gerhardt said, "Oh my gosh, this should be front page news, not page 6," which was her column or something.
Yeah.
And so then the Washington Post sent a reporter to Dallas to talk to me, and then that story came out not on page 1, but as a fluff piece in the Sunday supplement, because, as it turns out, Jane Mayer is married to the editor of the Washington Post. Ta-da!
Yeah.
Gotcha!
Yeah.
So
Wow.
anyway, apparently in this little circle in the Northeast, it's just like the little circles in Arkansas.
Sure.
So I guess it's human nature everywhere.
Of course. What about recently? Since I know the book hasn't been out for very long, but I mean, do you hear anything now, or are they just kind of ignoring you?
Oh, very good of you to come back to the rest of the question.
Yeah.
After my rambling on about that.
That's okay.
No. Here's the thing, and again, in Chapter 50, where I talk about Hillary's cognitive impairment, I also talk about the Clintons' 17 truth suppression techniques. And I got these from Dave Martin, goes by DC Dave, has a great website with interesting information. Can't say I always agree with Dave, but of course I don't always agree with everyone,
Sure.
or anyone, hardly.
Sure.
But he came up with these 17 truth suppression techniques that the Clintons use. And number 1 is ignore.
Yeah.
Okay? So right now, and this is my very favorite, right now I am being ignored.
Yeah.
Okay? So the same NBC mentality that didn't see my lawsuit taking an issue to the Supreme Court and winning against the sitting president, they didn't see that as news.
Right.
They're certainly not going to see my book as news, are they?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's better than being threatened, I guess. What was by the way, so there was something that we never did come back to yesterday on Gary's show. Something about we just kind of forgot about it, but it's something between you and Catherine about fish on a porch. What was that about?
Oh, I don't think Catherine wants to talk about that.
Oh, okay.
but she has had some strange things happen here, and she's a person of amazing integrity. I've been really impressed with Catherine, and the more I get to know her, the more respect I have for her.
Yeah, because she's confronted Hillary a couple times over the years at events here in New Hampshire.
Exactly. In fact, rather recently, and she thinks that if she talks about these things, it'll sound paranoid. And I said, honey, it ain't paranoia when they are out to get you.
Sure.
But, you know,
Yeah.
If she ever wants to talk about that, I guess we'll let her do it. But she did seem rather reluctant.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. And what was because I don't think we got into this on the air, but I remember we had a brief conversation off the air after Gary's show about this. But Bill Clinton's health, do you know anything or have any speculation about that? As people say, he doesn't look well, he doesn't sound well. I mean, I haven't seen him up close in person, and I assume you haven't either in a very long time. But
no, I have.
Oh, you have recently?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I hate to say this, but as we approach the age of 70, we we see each other at funerals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen him at a couple of funerals in the last 6 months.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I guess the last time before that in a social setting was at our 50th high school reunion. So we graduated in '64, so that would have been in the fall of 2014.
Oh, okay. Oh, so not long ago.
He looked bad then, but he looks way worse now. In fact, I guess if you laid him out side by side with the guy in the coffin, he looks worse.
Wow. Jeez, so, I mean, he looked good at the Democratic convention, but obviously they put a bunch of makeup on him and put him under a soft lens and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, do you hear it? I don't know if you want to discuss it or not. So if you don't want to answer, I understand. But I mean, I'll ask: do you hear anything in the circles you're in about his health?
Everyone just talks about it, and depending on whether they like him or not.
Sure. Yeah.
what they say about it and what it might be.
Yeah.
I speculated, because the Clintons are never truthful about much of anything.
Yeah.
That when he started on that vegan diet very famously a couple of years ago, I wondered if that was some cover for knowing he was going to lose weight and, that he had something wrong with him.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't be healthy on a vegan diet, so please, vegans, don't write to me about that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, there is a bit of that perspective. And being Italian, I thought he just needs a month of some good lasagna and
right.
whatever.
Yeah, because the theory that some people have is that there is a problem with his health and they're trying to hide it. But what's odd too? I remember this had to be. I think this was right after he left office. He made a comment in an interview that, and I'm curious if he ever talked like this around you back in the day. But I remember him making a comment that he didn't think he was going to live a long life. That he expected to die young. Did he ever say anything like that around you?
Yeah, he had that, and I've known a lot of guys who had that, particularly when their fathers died young. Now, of course, Billy has no idea who his father is.
Right.
But not having a father, I think, sometimes engenders that feeling in people, and I just have to throw this in because it's such a great story. I have a friend in Texas who is in his 70s now, and his father lived with him the last, 20 years of his father's life. But he said when his father was about 97 years old and was a widower at that point, his wife had died, and so he was about 97 and in otherwise good health, but all of a sudden it just seemed like he lost the will to live.
Yeah.
And so my friend, wanting to help his father, hired a hooker to come and live with him. And totally revived him, and he lived to be 102. So anyway, I'm not saying that's necessarily a good substitute for everyone, but I just thought it was funny that different people have, these different views of life, and a lot of people, if their parent was 97, would say, well, let them lie down and die, but then there are other ways of looking at it. So, we all have our own perspectives coming from our past, and again, as I've mentioned about Billy and Hillary Clinton, they both have traumatic pasts that led them to be who they are, and without therapy, this is what we get.
Do you think, I hear, and we're almost we're running low on time, but I want to ask you this from your perspective. I mean, I hear the word used a lot, and I don't know, and I've used it myself. I don't know if it's accurate. I don't know Hillary Clinton, but I hear the word sociopath thrown around in regard to her. I mean, how do you feel about that?
I think a sociopath, if you look up the definition, which I haven't done since I was studying psychology so many years ago, but a sociopath basically does not care about people and does not care about rules, and none of it applies to them. They have no empathy. I think if you look at this woman and you look at the people around her, her staff, the closest people to her, are terrified of her.
Yeah.
And Billy never knows when she's going to pick up a lamp or a vase or a cocktail glass and throw it at him. So, I think it fits perfectly.
Yeah. Is she violent? Is she prone to violence? I know that...
Yes. Billy talked about that, and the state troopers in Arkansas at the governor's mansion talked about that. She is violent and vicious. And I just got an email from someone this morning who said that her friend said it doesn't matter what Hillary does in private, but when she's out in public, she puts on a proper demeanor and whatever. And so that's okay in a president. And I remember, and you may, but probably don't, but in 92 when Billy was running and all this talk was about Jennifer Flowers and all these other things, Whitewater, all of this stuff the Clintons had done, or not all of it, the tip of the iceberg that people knew about, people said, well, what difference does character make? What a person does in private has nothing to do with what they would do in the Oval Office. Well, we now know it does have to do with what you'll do in the Oval Office. But to me, character and integrity are the most important things. And so, you take someone like Catherine Perdomo O'Brien, who is the state representative here from Derry, I don't have to go down the list of every political issue to know how she would react to these things, because I am so convinced of her integrity and the basic decency of this person. That's what's important. And a person like that will even have a rational conversation with a person on the other side of the aisle and try to come up with a win-win situation, a win-win solution when that's possible. But that has to come from a place of integrity, a foundational character. And this is what both Billy and Hillary Clinton are lacking: decent foundational character.
Yeah. Well, listen, Dolly, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Of course, the website, dollykyle.com, very nice website. There's a lot of great information about you there. And, of course, the book is called Hillary, the Other Woman. And I could talk to you forever. This has been great, but thank you so much. And
well, Matt, you read the book, and then we'll talk again, because
that's what I was thinking. Yep.
the blood trail, and other chapters that we haven't even talked about.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that actually, I was going to ask you that. I was going to put you on the spot and ask you if you would come back on after I have a chance to read the book, because I'm definitely I've moved this to the top of my reading list. So
absolutely, I probably won't be able to do it in person.
Sure.
Because I will be heading back south one of these days. Although it's pretty nice up here, I got to say. Not in the winter. Not in the winter.
Right. But good place to visit in the summer. All right. All right. Well, Dolly, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Have a great night.
Okay. Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.